This morning, our chalice lighters are Lynn and Bob Griffith, and as they make their way forward, we invite all of you to please rise in body or in spirit to speak aloud the words of affirmation which can be found on the back of the bulletin. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need. For these high purposes do we unite in worship.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure who the author is, so this will just come from me. Whether you are from the south, the east, the north, or the west. Whether you were born into this faith, found it, or it found you. Whether you feel at home or are still trying to find your place. Whether you believe in God, are open to mystery, or still have no idea. Whether you are unemployed, underemployed, cobbling things together, overworking, or in school. Whether you hold anxiety, grief, confusion, anger, hope, restlessness, or deep peace. Unitarian Universalism has a place for you. It is right here, and this chalice is lit for you.
Please remain.
It's a blessing we were born. I'll start with a story. A story about when I sang with a group of women led by Carolyn McDade, the poet who wrote Spirit of Life, the song that we often sing here. It was a weekend-long workshop with Carolyn at the piano. A circle of women, a dear friend of mine, traveled together to go and be with there. And one afternoon as we were singing, I had this thought that if I ever stopped and didn't stop to notice the rainbow, then I was surely finished here on earth. I wrote this thought in my journal just as we sang a song and arrived at the final verse. There is a bow within the rain, and it will come and bend again, and colors shine where we have been together. I had no idea that that was the end of the song. And yet in that moment, I knew that I felt the connection in that group of women, and it touched me in a way that deepened my connection to something bigger. Has anyone ever here experienced anything like that? Well, there's something that intrigues me about these moments. These times when all of life's little disturbances just fall away and I'm left with a sense of awe and connection. I feel held. I imagine those times as little gifts to me and only for me. I am worthy of this gift, and gratitude swells in my being. But then I have to ask, a connection to what? What is that thing that I feel held by? Love? God? The Spirit of life? This one particular moment in time is special, and I will always remember it, but it's not the only one. I call these occurrences magic moments. I experience and choose to notice these little gifts, and I know that it is a blessing to be born with all the magic happening around me. It matters what we do with our life. Another story. It starts as many tales do once upon a time. A traveler happened upon a large group of workers, and his curiosity led him to ask one of them what they were doing. I'm laying bricks, answered one of the workers, who was very worn out, but must have kept going. But with so many workers that it seemed that there must be something more going on. So he came to another laborer and asked the same question, "What are you doing?" "I'm building a wall," she said. "It will be a very large wall, so I cannot stop to talk, but I must get back to work." The traveler thanked her and moved on, and he came to a third and asked again, "What are you doing?" "Me?" said the laborer. "I'm building a cathedral." The traveler looked astonished, and the worker continued, "I have been at this for a very long time, and this cathedral will not be finished in my lifetime, but I know it will be a magnificent cathedral. Perhaps my children will continue what has been started, and maybe my grandchildren and those that come after will see the fruits of my labor." And that's the end of the story. And for me, it answers the question why it matters what we do with our lives. What each of us knows about God is a piece of the truth. I read an article a few years back in the Quest magazine, which is the monthly publication of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, which gave me a tiny glimpse into what that thing might be, at least the way that I understand it. And it's called Process Theology. Here's a little background. Alfred North Whitehead was born in 1861 and trained in mathematics and science, and is considered the father of process philosophy, which has been applied to a variety of disciplines, such as theology and ecology. He was also interested in educational philosophy and epistemology, the philosophy of knowledge and belief. Whitehead's process philosophy argues that, quote, "there is urgency in coming to see the world as a web of interrelated processes of which we are all integral parts, so that all of our choices and all of our actions have consequences for the world around us," unquote. Sounds a bit like our seventh principle, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. He also said, "Everything of importance has been said before by someone who did not discover it." And that's where I come in. You'll have to decide for yourself if this is important or not, but for me, it's one way of connecting all the stuff I don't know with what I experience in this lived life. So with the help of Reverend Elizabeth Stevens, who wrote the article in Quest, I hope to relate to you a bit about what I think that connection is, the magic. Elizabeth Stevens is a UU minister in Moscow, Idaho, and in this article, she starts by telling about her family and how they are not morning people, and the methods that she uses to get them up sounds a lot like my household growing up. My mom had a beautiful soprano voice, and she would come down the hall, swing the door open and sing, "Oh, what a beautiful morning, oh, what a beautiful day, or rise and shine and give God the glory, glory." And if that didn't work, she'd resort to turning on the light in the darkened room, and I hated that. Reverend Stevens goes on to describe how she has, at times, pulled the covers off the sleeping person or out of bed entirely and onto the floor. She admits this is not the best way to wake up somebody, especially someone you love. But, she says, if you really want someone to get up and moving, you should go to the kitchen and make pancakes. And the smell of those pancakes in the morning is what she calls God. She states, "God is like the smell of pancakes, luring you downstairs to where you'll be nourished." In my opinion, if there is a God, it would smell like freshly made pancakes. Maybe with some bacon on the side. So going from pancakes to process theology may be a bit of a stretch, but bear with me. Reverend Stevens uses the word God here, but I don't necessarily think of the societal God or the cultural God, but one, or like the one that watches over us. You could insert the spark of creation, life force, goodness, or love, but it's that thing, it's that connection. She continues, God works like the smell of pancakes in the morning to awaken longings deep in the heart, luring not just people, but all of creation forward in a continually unfolding process of growing and becoming. Now we're going to go back to Whitehead's thought of metaphysics. And as science, such as quantum mechanics, emerged, the complexity and the contradictions also came into play in his mind. The idea that a God set the world in motion and let it run no longer worked. His observations led him to understand that at the smallest level, things were not predictable. It was as if the particles were choosing to behave a certain way or not. And even the act of observing had an effect on the experiment. To make sense of all this, we have to begin with the assumption that the universe really is the universe and not an illusion. Whitehead named what the universe is made up of is called actual entities. And Reverend Stephen explains that to define actual entities, you need to break up matter into the smallest possible particle, or the smallest particle possible. So we've got organisms and matter that are made up of molecules. Molecules are made up of atoms. Atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, plus whatever holds them all together. Protons and neutrons are made up of quarks, plus whatever holds them together. So imagine the tiniest particles there are existing in space. Then take it one step further and apply that to time. I barely get that, but she goes on. So we have this infinitely small particle in an infinitely brief moment of time, and that is an actual entity. We don't have to do it alone. Whitehead calls the organization of these actual entities systems or societies, and understanding is that each society chooses to work together with all the other societies, thus creating the universe as it is. In other words, in relationship. On Wikipedia, it said Whitehead argued that reality was fundamentally constructed by events rather than substances, and that these events cannot be defined apart from their relationship to others, thus rejecting the theory of independently existing substances. Now, what that means on a scientific level, I really can't say. But simply put, everything has an effect on everything else. Stevens says, the simplest way to access process theology is to embrace the notion that we are part of a universe of free choosers, a universe in the process of becoming what the participants in the universe are choosing to become. To Whitehead, God is a word for actual entity, but my choice to notice the small magic moments, the connections, may just create a space where anything can happen. Reverend Stevens explains that God is what keeps pulling the universe forward, pulling it toward life and love and peace and connection. And there's that connection piece again. She goes on, the God in process theology isn't in charge, but God pulls on the heartstrings and activates deeper, life-giving, and love-filled longings. The God of process theology doesn't make rules. But if God smells like is the smell of pancakes, isn't that worth celebrating? What if we, as the choosers, make the rules? Perhaps the more we notice, the more we can change the environment around us. A few years ago, after deciding to leave my Director of Religious Exploration position, feeling uncertain and scared that I quit my job that I loved, not knowing really what I was going to do next, I opened an email message from the Church of the Larger Fellowship called the Daily Compass, and a quote from theologian Joseph Campbell was there, and this is what it said. We must be willing to let go of the life we planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. That message, at that day, right at that moment, you just can't get any better than that. And there it is. My choice to continue to hear the music, sing the song, and notice the connection of the rain amidst the rainbow.